dancing girl, a promise, and a head on a plate. Today's gospel is not for the faint-hearted. It shakes us up and reminds us of the violent, volatile, and visceral times that Jesus lived in. And usually for a gospel reading, Jesus doesn't actually get much of a mention. It's all about John the Baptist. The story is there to highlight to early believers the links between John, the righteous man put to death by political manoeuvring, and Jesus, the righteous man who got put to death by political manoeuvring. Luke makes the link in a different way, by showing Jesus' mother Mary and John's mother Elizabeth as close family members and confidants. This story isn't nearly so cosy and reminds us that standing up to powerful rulers in the ancient world usually only had one outcome. We are transported to Herod's banqueting hall on the occasion of his birthday. And for me, it's very much like a film. You can imagine the excess, the feasting, the drinking, the plush surroundings. Important men, and we know from the story it was a men-only event, would be served by the palace servants while musicians entertained them. This contrasts with John the Baptist's surroundings. We know that he is languishing in a prison cell somewhere nearby, but daring to point out that Herod's marriage to his brother's wife violated Jewish law. John would be hungry, thirsty, and scared, and as a prisoner at the very bottom of the social scale. Of course, John was known for having a very modest life and for distancing himself from comfort. But I can't help thinking that enforced imprisonment must have been very different from the experience of willing self-restraint. So at the time when the banquet is going on, Herod and John are about as opposite as they can be. And it is at this moment the scene is shaken up. The daughter of Herod's wife, Herodias, comes in and begins to dance for the assembled men. And it's at this point I would like a bit more information. Dancing expresses so much. It's often a sign of freedom, of joy, of passion. I mean, is it just me, but there's a big difference between a Morris dance and a lap dance. I need more information. Is this a young girl who was pushed into performing a cute ballet recital? Or was it a young woman manipulating the crowd with a seductive belly dance? We just don't know. Either way, the assembled crowd is pleased, and the king makes his grave error. He offers to grant her whatever she wishes. Prompted by her mother, who apparently has a grudge against John the Baptist, she gruesomely asks for John's head on a platter. Herod is portrayed as greatly distressed by the request to kill the man of God, but he stands by his pledge and delivers it. At this point, I want to pause to consider another rash promise and another dancing girl. There is a story in the Old Testament, in the book of Judges, which shares some of the same features of this story, whilst being decidedly different. In a nutshell, Jephthah, and I may get that name, I may pronounce that several different ways, but I'll go with Jephthah. He's a mighty warrior, and he is tasked with defending Israel against their enemies, the Ammonites. Jephthah prays to God, saying, "If you will give the Ammonites into my hand, then whoever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return victorious from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, to be offered up by me as a burnt offering." Jephthah wins a massive victory, crushing the Ammonites. and he returns home. To his horror, he is met by his only child, his daughter, who comes out of the house to meet him and is dancing with joy because of his success in battle. He is heartbroken and says, "Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low. You have become the cause of great trouble to me, for I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow." He allows her some time to prepare for her death before sacrificing her. Again, a very grisly tale. Given the cultures these stories originated from, it is perhaps inevitable that the women get the blame in both stories. Though there is clear sexism in these stories, I'm going to resist the temptation to focus on that. I think there is a broader lesson for us today about promises and about guilt. Historical evidence attests that Herod did kill John the Baptist, but not because of an ill-judged offer at a party. Outside of the Bible, it is recorded that he was killed because of the great influence that John had over the people and the threat that this posed to Herod should John decide to lead a rebellion. If we trust this account, it is definitely Herod's decision. Even taking Mark's version of events as our starting point, Mark is clear that Herod makes the offer as a show of power and control over the kingdom. Therefore, to blame two women whispering in a back room may or may not be diverting attention away from the massive misuse of authority on display. For Jephthah too, there is no averting his guilt by placing his attention on his daughter. He puts God to the test, a big no-no. And he offers God a human sacrifice, which Scripture clearly states is a complete abomination. His reputation and his word mean more to him than his daughter, and she bears the ultimate punishment for his arrogance towards God. You may have noticed that leaders who make promises they struggle to keep, or who try to shift the blame for terrible decisions onto others, are not yet a thing of the past. Over the last few days, tens of thousands of people have protested Donald Trump's visit to the UK. People have used the visit to highlight his record on torture, treatment of asylum seekers and immigrants, disability, Islamophobia, eroding women's and LGBT rights, his lack of support for those on low incomes, racism, the list goes on and on. And of course, it's not just in America that leaders abuse their authority and seek to place the blame on those who do not get their voices heard. In the UK too, we have seen policies which penalise those who are vulnerable, whilst also subtly suggesting that those who are poor or disabled or refugees do not deserve a good quality of life. We have our part to play in calling out bad leaders and bringing them to account. Because as Jesus and John the Baptist show, those who mistreat humanity disrupt God's intention for peace in creation. Perhaps even harder than that, though, is the need to look within ourselves. Of course, we read about Herod and Jephthah and go, well, I'm not sacrificing or beheading anyone. I hope. Any of you? Maybe not. But I think many of us will have prayed for something and said, God, if you do this, I'll go to church every week, or I'll give money to charity, or I'll be nicer to that so-and-so next door, or whatever. Bargains like these are usually made in times of desperation. but maybe they show that we need to be more trusting of God, and also aware that if we can so easily come up with a list of things that we could do to please God, maybe we should be doing them anyway. This may be milder, but it's still on the scale of bargains we may not be able to keep. There are also times in all our lives when we start down a course of action before we really understand its consequences. We might overstate our abilities or commitment or capacity and find ourselves not sentencing someone to death, hopefully, but maybe letting someone down. I think these stories tell us that allowing others to suffer so that we can save face is not the right thing to do. The harder thing is to stand up and admit our faults. But as we often find, the right thing isn't usually the easy course of action. In our gospel, we had a dancing girl, a promise, and a head on a plate. Today, we still have the power and decadence and all that John the Baptist and later Jesus stood against. We still have conflicting stories, we have bargains, and we have blame. But more important than all of these things, we have God. Let us pray. Faithful God, we thank you for the life and witness of John the Baptist. Like him, may we always be ready to stand up to those in authority. Guide us in times when we are tempted to make foolish bargains with you or with others. Help us when our big mouths get us into trouble, and give us the strength to do the right thing. Amen.
Amen.